Now, to mark a year since the devastating floods, the Brisbane City Council yesterday hosted a rather small reception to honour victims, volunteers and workers who helped in the flood effort. The commemorations in the city have indeed been low-key, and there are concerns politics have begun to creep in. Queensland Opposition Leader Campbell Newman joins us now from Brisbane. Campbell Newman, good morning.
Good morning, Michael. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Now, as one of the leaders involved in that flood recovery effort in those dark days a year ago, how do you judge the recovery effort in your city 12 months on?
Oh, look, I think it's sensational overall what's been achieved, particularly by the Brisbane City Council and supporting agencies and, of course, all those community volunteers. If you look at Brisbane today, it's powering on ahead. It's a vibrant, exciting place, and you'd never know that it happened. Sadly, though, if you go down to some of the streets in the suburbs, into the commercial areas that were flooded, you do see that they're clearly individuals and businesses that have really been hit hard. It'll take them years to recover, and I think those are the people we need to be particularly thinking about right now on the 1 year anniversary.
What more needs to be done to help those people?
Well, I think it's an issue for the state government and the federal government. It goes to things like the insurance issues for the future, which sadly this week seem to be put in the too hard basket. It's also, if I'd been, for example, the Premier, it's also initiatives that could have been put in place to help businesses like the payroll tax front. I mean, many businesses I've spoken to made the point that they continued to employ staff. They had no cash flow, no income coming in, but they hung on to those staff. As a result, they still had to pay payroll tax. Now, the government could have been far more generous in looking after those businesses, and that's an example of what I'd have done if I'd been the Premier.
As a former Lord Mayor of Brisbane, does it strike you as strange that the commemorations in Brisbane compared to other regional centres have been so small, so low-key?
Well, look, that's a matter for both the Premier and the current Lord Mayor Graham Quirk. I'm the leader of the LNP. I'm not, though, an elected official, and it's up to them to set those events up, and you've really got to direct those questions.
Would you have liked to see something bigger to allow Brisbane residents to gather, as we've seen in Ipswich and other parts of the state?
Well, all I'll say is that I've always, from the time of the floods onwards, always been just so appreciative in my comments of the work, particularly of the Mud Army volunteers that Councillor Amanda Cooper of the Brisbane City Council coordinated. I've always said what a great community spirit we saw, and I'd be delighted to attend any sort of commemorative event that was held in Brisbane. But the big thing that we need in Queensland right now is we need change. We need a new, fresh, enthusiastic government. I'm prepared to lead that government, and that's why we do need to have an election soon, so we can get Queensland back on track.
Now, based on those comments, politics is indeed quickly intruding. The election could be very soon. You were quoted in The Australian this morning as criticising Premier Bligh for chasing the media and big-noting herself by going to these other commemoration events in Queensland. Shouldn't she be there as Premier?
Look, actually, that's not what was said. I simply was asked yesterday why I wasn't going to a whole lot of events, and I made the point that I didn't feel the need to go off and big note myself.
It's a veiled reference to the Premier, though.
No, well, other people can make that assertion or draw that conclusion, but that's not what I was saying. I've been out consistently talking about the great effort we've seen from people during the floods. People know about the leadership that I provided and my administration provided to this city during the floods, and all I've been doing this week is saying that it's now time to get a change in Queensland, to get the state back on track. I will bring that same sort of leadership, enthusiasm and passion if I become the Premier of Queensland. And frankly, comments by the Labor Party about electioneering, well, they have been electioneering. They've been out in force last weekend, and also the Premier is on the front page of the Gold Coast Bulletin with a multi-million-dollar announcement only 2 days ago. I mean, they can't have it both ways. The
final report of the Floods Royal Commission is due at the end of February. Do you expect the Premier to get the election out of the way before then?
Oh, look, that's one for her. I certainly look forward to hearing what the Royal Commission says. I make the point, though, that one thing I hope that isn't lost in all this, in terms of some of the legalistic stuff and the technical stuff, the bottom line is that this is a subtropical city, Brisbane, and Queensland's a subtropical and tropical state. We do have extremes of weather, and ultimately the message I'd like to give the community is that we can't stop flooding in many of our cities. We can't stop it, we can't prevent it. What we need to do is we need to be prepared. We need to have resilience, we need to have the plans in place to deal with flooding and the aftermath, and particularly that's why I've announced a focus on disaster management training for local government and supporting agencies if I become the Premier.
Okay, Campbell Newman in Brisbane, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks very much, Michael.